Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Filipino American Ministry Podcast. My name's Aaron, and I'm with my co-host, Henrik. If you like this podcast, please subscribe.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about why does the second generation leave their home churches? So I think what we're talking about here is second generation is a term to describe people who grew up in America and their parents just immigrated to America. And the question is, why do they leave their home church where they grew up? I think for a lot of Filipino Americans who are second generation, they grew up in Filipino American church, and then they end up leaving. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Aaron, do you have any... I think we should start off with your story. So you actually left our church a few years ago. Can you
A few years ago?
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time. So can you tell us a story about how you left?
Yeah, sure. I left, I think, in 2012. Yeah, I joined in 2004, 2005, somewhere between those years. And been there as a youth and also a young adult. So I started the Young Adults Ministries there. And in 2012, I left. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, I think you actually stayed until 2014 or 13.
13, probably.
Yeah, because we started in 2011, right? Yeah,
No. 10.
Oh, yeah. We started fall of 2010 with the young adults, and then you left in 2013. So could you explain what did you do when you left, or your thought process?
My thought process during the time?
Yeah.
So I started the Young Adults mainly because a lot of my peers were leaving church at that time. I think when they go to college, they usually don't come back. And so for some reason, I started a Bible study. I can still remember, like, it was me and like 3 girls, the first like Bible study. And eventually, it grew into like 4 or 5 groups. And, it was going pretty well. But I think at that time, I felt like I needed some training. I needed help. So I decided to go seminary. And also at that same time, somebody from California was calling me to help with a church plant. And so after like 3 months of thinking about it, decided to move to California. Yeah.
So it was mainly a desire to get training and another opportunity in another location.
Yeah, I thought, I think at that time, I thought that the young adults would be able to stand on their own. I think I was wrong at that point. But at the same time, I also felt like I needed more training. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you noticed some people were leaving the church like around college age.
Yeah.
I think that's a common story for Filipino American churches is students are part of the church until college and then they leave. So what kind of reasons were you able to see why people were leaving around college age?
I think with our church in particular, there isn't really. It seems like there isn't really a space or something for the young adults. They finish high school or they finish being part of the youth group, and they get tired of just playing games or sort of more of like a attractional type of model, and they're seeking for like, I think something deeper at least. Or on the other hand, nothing deeper is maybe holding them to stay at the church. So either like they go to a different church if they're looking for something deep, or they stop going to church if nothing deep is holding them or keeping them at church. Like they have no reason to really stay, right? Like I feel like they just stay there because that's where they've been going to their whole lives. That's where their parents go to. But it's not something that they would stay at if there's no other reason.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I remember one pastor telling me that the reason why the second generation leave is because they don't consider their parents' church their home church.
Yeah.
And they see it as more like that's their parents' church. So they don't really take... I think when they're in high school, they're not really thinking about it.
Yeah.
But when they're in college, then they start thinking, this church is not really meant for me. So then they leave. I think it's nice you mentioned two scenarios. One, they leave because they're there's nothing there that's deep for them, so they go to another church. And then one where it's because there's nothing there that's keeping them. I think that's like a common story for why the next generation leaves in general, is because they're not really Christians to begin with, so they don't really stay at the church, or they don't see a reason to stay. And then on the other side of on the culture aspect, they don't stay because the culture is different from them. It's more of a Filipino culture rather than it being a Filipino American culture. And I can relate to that too, because in my story, when I was at my church, I was thinking of leaving in around college age. For that reason that you mentioned, is because I wasn't really growing in my church. And I noticed in college, when I met other Christians from other ministries, they were growing, and they had nicer churches where they were like growing. And I wanted to be in that church, or I wanted to go to those churches instead of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was that temptation, or not temptation, but there was that desire to think, oh, maybe I should just go to another church.
Yeah. Well, you said that some of them leave because they're not Christian to begin with. I'm not sure if I would go that far. I would probably just say that like there's no sort of deeper discipleship.
Oh, okay.
Like at least for them growing up, and I don't know if it's just, I don't think like, it's not that the parents don't want their kids to grow. I think they do want their kids to grow, but maybe it's just a lack of resource, or I'm not so sure. But I know just from personal experience that it seems like there's just something lacking, I think, with the discipleship aspect, at least for young adults.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there are other reasons why Filipino Americans leave, right? Like cultural reasons. A lot of them are American in culture compared to their first generation parents. But I think those could be bridged if there is like some deep discipleship and deep relationships, especially that happen between younger and older, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
intergenerational.
Intergenerational and intercultural too. So like, I think if like there's a guy there who's like a tito, who like would do deeper discipleship and mentoring, I think that even that is enough to kind of bridge the gap.
Yeah. I think, that's a good point. And also when I mentioned that, I wasn't saying that they're not Christians, but I was referring to like those articles that say the younger generation leaves because they're not Christian to begin with. But I think I see what you're saying is like there's another point, there's another aspect of they leave because there's no program there that's second gen, that's there for the second gen. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe it's more of a lack of like figuring out how to incorporate the second generation in the church in ways that are more than just like, oh, here are kids, let's make them sing songs or play worship songs. You know, like more than that, you know.
So you're already talking about some potential solutions for the second gen for why they leave.
Yeah. But anyways, what do you think? What are some of the reasons you're thinking?
Yeah, I think, related to your story, I think second gen is in general like they're generally transient. I mean, they're in a transient stage of life. Like when they're in college, all opportunities are open. But when they're in high school, there's no really opportunity to leave. They can't drive yet, so they're just going to stay with their church. That's all they knew, or that's all they know. That's where they grew up. But I think when you start learning how to drive, and when you're in college and you're thinking about your future career, and then also on top of that, you're thinking of who you're going to marry. I think that's when people start to leave, or that's when they see that as a possibility.
Yeah. Well, your story is kind of different too because you actually lived in campus. Like I never really left, you know, and I went to like a small college, so I stayed in the vicinity of the church.
Yeah.
So yours is a little bit different. So you could probably speak more about that.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm referring to is like a lot of people in our church have left because they got married to someone else. So that's one. I think that's a common one why people have left. And also another one is they moved to a different college. Like in my case, my college wasn't very close to our church. So there were times when I wasn't living at home. There were times when I was living on the campus. So if someone is doing college in a different state, then they're going to leave and then they go to another church. So I'm just pointing out at that transientness.
Yeah.
And also in your case, you left because you had an opportunity. But I'm thinking of like titos and titas who are trying to settle down.
Okay.
They're going to stay longer because they don't want to keep moving their kids from their schools and the community that they have with their kids. So they're more likely to stay at the church because they're trying to settle down. But with like college age, they're not trying to settle down. They're trying to explore the world. And so I think that's one thing. They're like the transient stage of life and also like seeing the different kinds of opportunities there are in life. Like in your case, you wanted to get trained, so you left. So it's not that you had a problem with the church. It's just your stage of life where you have that opportunity.
Yeah. I've had problems, but I didn't leave.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like the problems, they exist, but they were not strong enough for you to leave. Yeah.
I do think though one of the biggest reasons is like cultural. I didn't feel it enough. Maybe you could speak to this, but for me, it didn't really affect me that much because I'm more of a 1.5. But I know for some probably like they're Filipino, but only like they just look Filipino, but not like inside. I mean, they eat Filipino food, but they're not really like Filipino in culture.
Yeah, I think in my case, because I'm second gen and I'm not 1.5. I think there's a level of like my parents. I'm an only child, so my parents brought me to all the events with first gen. So like if Tita had a dinner, my parents would go there, and then I would be forced to go. So my tolerance, I think, was built for first gen. So even though I'm second gen, I developed the tolerance for the first gen.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, what you said is really, I mean, that's really important, like culture, because I think when I was at our church, one of the reasons I stayed is because there are other second gen Filipino Americans there.
Mm-hmm.
So that sense of community, if I have that sense of community, then I'll be more likely to stay at the church if there are other second gens like me. But if it's just first gen, like what happened to me in 2015 when all my friends left,
Sorry,
I
dude.
felt it's all right. But when you guys left, I felt alone, and so there's first gens there. So the people that I gravitated to was the youth because they're second gen. So they're younger, but their culture is like mine. The only difference is that I'm 10 years older than them. So I gravitated to the youth.
Dude, how do you do that? Like whenever I go back to the youth, right? And I hang out with them a little bit, like I can relate, but once they start talking about stuff, it's like, wait, this is so childish, or like I can't relate.
Yeah. They train me. So like they would say these slang. Yeah, they would say, "I bet," and I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" So they kind of told me like the cultural trends. So I kind of understand Gen Z culture, even though I'm not Gen Z.
Yeah,
I think it's like I kind of don't understand their slang sometimes, but they tell me they over time they tell me. And at the same time, like they're Gen Z, they're second gen, but I still don't feel like they completely understand me at the same time. Mm-hmm. So like you're saying that I fit in. How can I fit in? That's actually, I don't fit in completely. And a lot of times they even hang out and do stuff and they don't include me. So even though they're second gen,
you're the Tito.
Yeah.
You're the Tito.
Yeah, so even though I'm
did
second
they call
gen,
you Tito now or still Kuya?
They said they won't call me Tito until I get a baby. So they call me Kuya. And then they call people who already have a baby but they're younger than me, they call them Tito. Yeah. Oh. I don't know if that's the rule though for
I think so. Like at church they call me Tito.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Even the ones who are 20s?
No, some of them call me Kuya.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that, like, even at our church, I notice, like, people get together. The first gen would get together. They would do karaoke and they would, like, sing and stuff. And the kids just, like, they're there. The second gen, they're there. They go do their own thing.
Yeah. And we would have our own room. Like, we would be in the living room. The adults would be in the kitchen or the dining room.
Yeah, we just get together when we eat,
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, so I guess, to summarize what we've talked about so far, the transientness and then the cultural gap.
Yeah.
I think I want to go more into the cultural differences. So can you give some examples of culture? So we've already established culture is one big factor, but what is it exactly? Can you make it more explicit? How does the second gen and the first gen clash in terms of culture?
I see. I think this is probably speaking more with the second gen who do want to stay or who want to help out. Like a clash happens because of the difference of culture. Let's just say with authority structure or church governance or just power in general. They're more American in the sense that it's more individualistic, or they look more in not at your age, right? Like Filipinos would, you would give respect to someone mainly based on their age, right? And our use of words kind of show that, right? Like you say tito or tita or kuya, even to somebody who's just like 1 month older than you, you would be like kuya or something like that. You kind of give this respect just because they're a little bit older than you. But with second gen, respect is more of like your skill or how capable you are. I mean, obviously, because they grew up in the Filipino church, they still say kuya or tito, and they have an idea of what it's like to show respect, right? They can survive and they can adapt. But I guess like that it does affect the way that they view how the church should be structured. So like an example would be like a youth leader, right? Like because they're second gen, a lot of times like the first generation would always look at them as just like youth, even though they're like older now. So it's kind of like hard for them, even though they're capable. Maybe some of them don't ever become like deacons or something like that. It's hard for them to be part of that like church governance or something like that, to make a bigger change. But somebody who's like maybe just like not someone who has not been that involved maybe at the church as long as that youth leader, just because they're a tito and they have kids and they are like part of that leadership already. So I guess I'm just saying like it's harder for the second gen to have some form of influence through being part of the leadership, besides just being like a youth leader.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
So that's I think that's probably one aspect of a cultural gap. And I think
before you move on, can you like expand what you mean by respect? Because I think I had this conversation with Anate, and she felt that the youth were disrespectful. And then she was wondering, like, isn't respect like universal? Like, it doesn't matter what culture you are or what generation. Respect should be a value that's held. It doesn't matter what generation you are. And so she felt that the second gen doesn't, they don't show that respect. So could you define what you mean by respect?
Yeah, so I think like language, right, in Filipino language also, like that respect is kind of built in the way you respond, right? You have words like to respond to someone, you say opo, or like sort of like a yes, but recognizing that person has more authority than you, or like is ranked higher than you, or because they're older. So you say stuff like that. But in American language, you don't really have that. You just like say yes. So I think you see this kind of the respect that Filipinos are talking about, even in the way language is used, right? It's sort of built in the language. Like in Filipino language, for example, opo is like, it means yes in English, but it's deeper than just yes. It's more of like a yes with a recognition that the person you're talking to deserves more respect because either they're most likely because they're older, right? Right. So, you don't really say opo to somebody who's younger than you. But in American language, there's no word for that. You can't really translate that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I guess you can say like yes, sir, but it still doesn't carry that kind of weight. You know what I mean? So, so maybe like the second gen is being respectful, but just the way that it comes across linguistically, like verbally, doesn't sound like it.
But yeah. Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with respect, I think the idea of respect too is that, like, who's going to win the argument, or not the argument, but who's going to win, who's going to have their way, basically. So if there's like a tita and then there's a youth, and then they say, like, the youth thinks we should do it this way, and then the tita thinks we should do it that way, then by virtue of age, the tita should win. Like, she should have her way. If she thinks one way is better, her way is better, then she should have her way. So there's that sense of respect, is like, if the adult says we can't do that, then and then the youth like kind of says, well, why not, or like answers back, then it's seen as disrespectful, or like a questioning of authority, and also because they're not automatically submitting.
It goes back to power, I think.
Yeah. So I think that, like, that power, like, and authority, that's as an aspect of authority. Because I think, to add on to what you're saying, is I think the younger generation, the way they look at authority and submission, is they're going to submit to someone who's competent,
capable.
Competent, capable, and experienced. So you can't just win their respect or win their submission, so to speak, just because of your age. But in Filipino culture, just because you're older, you should be able to have that say on. You should have the authority there, and so I think that's where the disconnect happens.
Yeah, I think the disconnect could happen even if both are being respectful. It's just that the way that they perceive the world around them, and then the way that they express themselves is just it's just like culturally different, like what seems respectful for you, it might not be the way that I'm trying to show respect.
Yeah. So you're saying that it's I guess you're saying the cultural way of showing respect, and then you're also talking about language, right? Like the language they use. Yeah,
the words.
Yeah, I actually had funny you mentioned that. There was an instance that happened in my church with the AV team, and I think I was trying to bridge the gap between the two generations. And the first generation, they said, they used a term like, this person is going to oversee you. And then to the youth, because like the youth were leading an the AV team. Then the adult was saying, I want, this person will oversee you, so you should report to him. So like those phrases, oversee and report. And then the way that the adult meant it was, this person is supposed to be your support, or like supposed to help you if you need help. But then the way that the youth interpreted it was, it sounded like the adult doesn't see them as trustworthy of that task. Like, oh, so why do I need an overseer? Why do I need to report to this guy? Because it seems like you're like micromanaging me, or saying that I'm not competent. So like just those phrases, like overseeing and reporting, can cause like some tension or unnecessary hurt or unnecessary miscommunication.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, is the miscommunication that happens because of the cultural and language gap.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think just to add on to this idea, like for me, and I was leading the youth. I was leading the youth ministry around like by myself at 25, and I was doing it for some time, and then I hear that I'm having overseers who I'm gonna have supervisors basically, and I think I was kind of offended when that first happened, because I was like, wait, I'm like 27, and why do I need an overseer? Or like, I'm 26, why do I need an adult to oversee what I'm doing? Yeah. It seems like you're questioning my competence. Like you don't trust me that I'm doing a good job. So, but then I think like what helped me like not be so offended by it was understanding, why did the adults do that in the first place? And I've seen in the past they do care about the second gen, so they don't want us to feel like we're neglected. So what I think the way that I reconciled it in my mind was, I think the first generation was just trying to show me that they cared about the youth ministry. So they put those adults over me because they wanted to show that they didn't want to let me go like rogue. They wanted to put someone on top. So there's that like disconnect or like misunderstanding. But in addition to that, I think there's that bias in the adults that if you're a second gen, you need to be supervised. So I think I kind of want to push back on that a little bit. Like, does that necessarily need to happen? Like, does the first generation really need to, like, I guess it goes back to your comment about how youth are looked at as youth, even though they're already like in their 20s, they're still looked at as if they were only a teenager. So I think I'm trying to understand, or like, could we like say something about, like that bias for adults, or that, the tendency for adults to want to put someone over a second gen?
Yeah. I mean, it could be a cultural thing. I mean, it could be a power thing, where they need maybe they're trying to figure out how to bridge the gap, and having an overseer is what they think is the best step. And I like kind of like what you said. They put an overseer to help. Like, that's the intention.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just something that I thought of. I was like wondering, do the adults need to? Maybe that's because of their perspective of youth. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why they're putting an overseer. But they could also be the case that I think in some degree the adults just wanted the youth ministry to be connected to them in some way. So they put an overseer so that I'm connected to them.
Mm-hmm. But I think in summary, if I was to like think of the big picture here, I think the main reason that the second gen leave is really because the church is first generation in identity. And the second generation they have their own identity, and it's just different. It's just not a place where they feel like they could belong. Now, again, I think our identity should be in Christ, and that should be our primary identity. But maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe that difference in identity is enough for most of them to seek other churches that they can feel more at home with. I've heard that, like, second generation Asian kids, whether they're Korean or Filipinos or Chinese, feel more at home with each other than they do with their first generation.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but it seems like in parachurch ministry, it seems true.
Yeah, definitely. That's my case exactly. Like, in one sense, when we were at our church, I felt at home because I'm Filipino. But then in another sense, I felt more like I could worship God more freely, and I could, my Christian life, my spiritual life was so much more fun and so much more. I was like growing so much more when I joined the Korean campus ministry at my school. Now that ministry is not Korean. It's a mixture of Korean, Chinese, and I was the only Filipino there. But to some degree, I felt more at home when I was there than I was at my home church. But I will say this though, that when you started the young adult ministry in 2010, I felt a sense of home, or like a sense of belonging that was deeper than my sense of belonging at KCM.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah, it felt that sense of belonging. I don't know. It just it felt really at home when it was us.
I see. Man, so I remember that time when you decided to like stay with because you were deciding between staying at the parachurch ministry or going to the young adults at our church.
Oh yeah. That's
that time.
Yeah, that's a separate thing. But I don't think it's cultural related. It was my campus ministry was trying to encourage us to be involved in our home churches, but at the same time, they were also needing like people to lead. So I had that like tension of, should I serve in my campus ministry, or should I help you with when you're starting? Yeah. Okay, so I think another thing I wanted to touch on was like hurt or like drama, because I think that's another reason why people leave. Do you have anything to say, like maybe gossip is a big component of this, or like what has your experience been with gossip or drama between the two generations?
It's kind of interesting to see that link, that Facebook post of that you and Sarah shared. I think about
Which one?
That link, that post about like conflict avoidance.
Oh,
like
yeah,
on
yeah.
a different quadrant. I forgot the title of that one.
Yeah, it was like it was like a quadrant picture where there was personal confrontation, and then, or there was like confrontation and non-confrontational, and then there was the other axis was emotional expression and non-emotional expression.
Yeah. Anyways, I thought I was thinking that was kind of interesting. You can cut that out, but
I think that's actually relevant, because I think passive aggressive, like that's something that's like from that picture, you see emotions are very expressive, but they're also non-confrontational, and that leads to a lot of like maybe passive aggressive behavior, and that can lead to some cultural drama and gossip.
Yeah,
because there's no confrontation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there's gonna be drama in every church, whether it's Filipino. Oh my gosh, they're shouting.
Yeah, they agree with you that there's gonna be drama in every church.
Okay, so let's restart. Drama. Like, are you talking about like drama between the first and second generation?
Yeah, have you seen instances of gossip affecting that, or drama, or do you think that that's a thing? Yeah, I wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I think. Well, for me it seems more like the second gen is caught in between drama that's happened that has like long roots. That's happened, like that's there for a long time. It's kind of related to the factionalism inside of the church. Like there's different cliques and different groups, at least from experience, that's what I've seen, right? Like at our church, there's different groups that have had some conflict in the past, and it seems like the kids, as they're growing up, they're just kind of caught in between those.
Yeah. So like you're saying, like the parents have drama or gossip.
Yeah, because they're conflict avoidance, and so
yeah,
it's more like a passive aggressive thing. They talk behind people's backs.
Yeah, I think. Oh, you're gonna say something?
Well, I was just thinking, like, I think with the second gen, they're more open to talking about that stuff and at least resolving it.
Yeah. I think what I was talking about when I brought this topic up was just as an example. Something that happened in our church was there was like a prayer meeting, and the adults wanted the youth or the younger generation to join the prayer meeting. And I think there was we heard some gossip, or we heard through the grapevine basically that the adults were kind of criticizing us or judging us for not joining them in the prayer meeting. And I think because of that gossip and that drama, I think that's why I think that turned off a lot of my friends. And the reason why I can say this, by the way, is because I think it's done. Like, it's water under the bridge. It's resolved now. But I remember that instance where gossip was really hurtful, and even to me. I wasn't the one involved directly, but I still felt hurt that the adults would say stuff like that about us to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be a recurring problem in Filipinos in general. Chismis.
Yeah. And I think we should talk about that in another episode.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
how can we grow from chismis and why does it happen and stuff like that? Yeah.
Don't let the titas hang out. I'm just kidding.
Separate.
Separate them at all costs. Just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the next question I can think of is, do you have any ideas on what the first generation can do to help the second generation stay? So we talked about why does the second generation leave, and what I want to look at more solutions now. Like, I think you kind of highlighted some of that. So what else can you say about what can the first generation do to help the second generation to stay?
I think for one is to actually have more second gen leadership. That would probably affect how the first and second generation are together at church. Have them more in leadership, but at the same time, like, don't look down on them as if they're still like teenagers. Right? That's probably one. And have more dialogue, like open dialogue, which is probably hard. But yeah, I think just opening up that opportunity and that dialogue to be able to communicate better and talk. And every church is different. Every situation is different. But I think it has to kind of start there. You can't really decide for the second generation because, I mean, they can, right? But at some point when they're old enough, the first gen can't really decide for the second gen. I mean, they can make decisions, but it might not be the best decisions. And I think having a second gen leader there would help in bringing up some of the blind spots that first gen might have. And in the same way, like, these second gen leaders can learn from first generation, because second generations, they also have their blind spot, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of highlighted that too, of like why there's overseers, and it's not to offend you, but it's just to help you. Yeah. So I think that's probably like a good start. If there's enough second generation leaders, then at least, they would have a voice. And then the other thing is like, maybe like some. I would probably just start there.
Yeah. So you mentioned two big ones as more second gen leadership and more dialogue, I think.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I think the first one, I can also speak from experience for that one, is I think there should be more second gen leadership, because what the tendency that happens is, at least in my case, was like they can put one second gen leader in a group, like say in Baptist churches we have committees, and if you have a committee of mainly first gen and then one second gen person there, because of the power structure, the authority, the first generation is just going to overpower the second gen's desires. Like the second gen may want to do something, like to do it one way, but then the first generation will overpower and say, "Oh, we should do it this way." And then, basically, the second gen doesn't have a voice. But if the committee was like split with second gen and first gen, then they have to reconcile that more and try to find compromise. And that happened to me a lot of times. Like they would put me in a committee, and it's not that they were trying to overpower me, but a lot of the decisions had to go with the majority. So I would voice my disagreement, but then they would say they would hear me out why I disagreed, and so I give them credit for that. But eventually we would always end up going with what they wanted to do because they were in the majority. So. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. And then the second one, dialogue. I think that's really key. Like, and this kind of related is we need a second gen leader who can kind of bridge the gap between the first generation and the second generation. Like, and I guess, just so that they would understand each other better, we need someone who can be the bridge to the gap, or at least encourage dialogue between the two generations. And I think, the dialogue, I was going to say something I forgot.
Well, I did want to add.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mentioned including second generation leadership, but I've seen, like from our church, for example, that we did have like second gen leadership, but it's always kind of like the lowest on the totem pole, you know. It's like they would add, kind of like you said, but they don't really have any voice in the sense that they can't really affect change. I think, first of all, there should be at least, if they're gonna work together, if they're gonna have a church where first and second can coexist, then there has to be like you said, like equal leadership, or at least like a more influential type of leadership from the second gen.
Right.
The other thing that I wanted to add is like there should be a plan on how to coexist or how to incorporate, whether you're gonna have that, or whether you're gonna have like one church together, or whether you're gonna have that two family, one household model, or you're gonna have like plant a second generation church model. The important thing is to have that dialogue and to plan, because if you don't, then it's always gonna end up like the same way.
That's a good point. Yeah, they really need to have a laid out plan, otherwise they're just going to be reactive rather than proactive.
If they don't have the vision, if they don't have a vision of what it would look like for our second generation to grow up at our church, well, the vision that's gonna happen is they're gonna leave. That's just how it is, you know. But if
by
they
design.
have a vision, but if they don't think ahead of time, like, okay, so what are we gonna do so that our second generation won't leave? But the problem is, like, most of the solutions they come up with is like, let's hire a youth pastor, so then they won't leave, right?
Yeah.
But maybe I also don't want to just give them the fault, because it may be also like a lack of resources and knowledge, that the second generation they're not just Filipinos, they're like an entirely different culture.
Yeah.
You know, so if people know that, then I think they're more ready, at least they are more accepting of having a plan that they could reach together.
Yeah, that's another good point. Having a plan.
Yeah, I think like you sent me a link before of how the two families, one church model.
Yeah.
Like, one thing that I remember from that story, that link that you sent me, is the leadership had a vision 10 years prior to that actually happening. They had a vision of both coexisting. You know? So I think, just like, you know, that saying in the Bible, without a vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
They're just reacting.
Right. Yeah, they need to be more proactive and come up with because I think this issue, this first gen, second gen, it's such a big issue, but it flies under the radar. It's not something that's on their radar. And that's why the second generation always leaves, because they don't have, because there's a problem that flies under the radar. They're not prepared for when they become college age Yeah.
I mean, it's not under the radar in the sense that Asian American churches are talking about it, right? Like the silent exodus of second-gen Asian Americans from churches. You see that.
Well,
and there's some talk about that.
Oh, yeah. But I think I don't know if I can say this in general, but I think in my church, it flies under the radar, like the second gen. And also, I think it's because it's a small church, so they already have a lot of things to take care of. So that's why I say it flies under the radar, because it just happens, and they're just more reactive. But what you were saying is, it is something that most churches are aware of. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just saying that there is talk about it.
Oh, yeah. There is talk about it. Yeah. But I think I would say that the Filipino churches, they only start talking about it after the fact, like when it's already happened that people have left. Like in our case, my church was only more aware of it when our generation left, and then they were thinking more. It was more on their radar. But even then, like, our church is still small, so there was little plan to. Well, I wouldn't say little plan, but at least from my perspective, it didn't seem like there was much of a set vision or plan on how the second and first generation are going to be in the same church.
This might be a little bit related, but maybe not completely. I also think that Filipino churches in general don't really gather together to like talk about at least like issues like this. Like the Filipino church as a whole, like, you know, in the state of Maryland, for example, or like in this DMV area where you're at. I don't know if they gather together to kind of talk about some of the issues that they're all going through.
Yeah.
You know, so perhaps if they did talk about it, then they could come up with better solutions.
Yeah, definitely. They need to compare notes and share experiences.
Yeah, it's just something that doesn't really happen a lot in our churches, I think.
Yeah. And that's why one of the reasons why we have this podcast, right? Because we want to.
It's a good start.
Yeah, we want to kind of start that conversation. I know other people have started it too, but we kind of want to perpetuate or continue that conversation and get this more on the radar for our Filipino American churches. Okay, so I think that's a good time. It's a good time to close. Do you have any last minute thoughts or things?
I'm good. No?
Okay, so yeah, now that we've identified some reasons, some possible solutions, what's next? Well, we plan to talk about these in future episodes. So please follow our podcast if you want to hear more content like this, and subscribe, rate it 5 stars if that's possible on your platform. And if you have anything else to add, feel free to email us or comment on our video or wherever you're seeing this, and we would love to dialogue. Peace.